Hi everyone, my name is Taffan. I'm from Sweden and I'm one of this year's EDD leaders. I'm here with Eugenio, the Regional Director of IOM, and we'll be having a little discussion here on some very, very important topics and I have some very interesting questions for you. I hope you will be able to answer some of those. Would you please tell everyone as well a little bit about your work as a Regional Director before we start off with the questions?
Well, IOM is the UN organization that deals with migration. And so our work here in Brussels specifically is to liaise with the European Union and the European member states on everything that has to do with migration policy and improving migration governance within Europe and also from Europe in relation to other regions of the world with which they interact on migration issues. And of course, as you can imagine, right now and since 3-4 years, this is a particularly hot topic for Europe.
Indeed it is. I'm going to start off by asking you a question on how we as a society and individuals can do our part and what that part is. How can we put end to violence against women and girls, migrants?
Well, I think first of all, as individual, I would say we have a responsibility of understanding and knowing and become as much as possible aware of the issue and make people around us aware. And I think we have a responsibility of refusing to normalize this type of problems. In many instances, in many situations, in many society, violence against women, gender violence, everything that goes with it is a sort of part of what happens on a daily basis. And I think we have to refuse that becomes just one other issue that we have. And I think as a society we have a responsibility to hold our political leader accountable for their policy, for their action, for how much they actually factor in gender issue and violence against women in their national as well as regional and international policy. We have had election across Europe in most countries. I think it would be good to look at how many of the new governments have actually this issue as one of their priority. And if not, I think we have an individual and collective responsibility of holding them accountable and respond the next election by voting for those who actually make this a priority.
Thank you. I want to get into something. We're speaking about women who are coming to Europe as migrants. I myself was a political refugee, and I did the same exact route that people do today to get to Europe. So I know how that is like through my mother. But I want to ask you how human trafficking is linked to violence against women, in particular migrant women.
Well, first of all, maybe you should actually say that because you have had your own and your family experience directly linked to this issue. Well, I think first of all that both violence and abuse against women as well as irregular migration and irregular routes are at the same time or could be either the cause or the result of irregular migration. And you have, of course, a lot of migrants, starting with women, of course, that might decide to try their luck through irregular means to reach safety in another country because of the abuse and the violence they have been suffering at home, either in their own community or by their society standard that in some parts might create this type of situation. Or migrants, women that have decided to go and look for a better option somewhere else, might en route end up being victims of violence and abuse because of the condition of that travel. I think the main challenges that we have is to look at how we can, first of all, reduce the exposure to violence and abuse en route for all migrants, of course, but especially for those that might be more exposed, like women, and start combating in a more aggressive way the issue of trafficking in women that thrive on the irregularity of the movement. The exploitation of movement, it's strengthened by the fact that most of these women move irregularly, move in a condition of vulnerability by definition, and therefore more exposed to exploitation, to violence and abuse.
I think you're touching on something very, very important here, trying to describe how what women might experience coming alone to Europe, making this very dangerous route. But the smugglers, the one who are I shouldn't say taking care, but the ones who are responsible for these people arriving to these countries and promising them that they'll get there. A lot of times, these smugglers are the ones using women on the go, trying to get to Europe or to safety. And I really would like to know your views and opinions on the migration situation in the Mediterranean region, and how that especially can affect women on the move, trying to reach safety.
Well, I think the main issue that we continue to push a little bit aside is that smuggling and trafficking is fundamentally a business. And as any other business, it requires a market. And so if we want to actually seriously fight smuggling, trafficking of all migrants, and again, especially those most vulnerable, then we should attack the element that constitute that market. One element is the fact that there are no alternatives. So for migrants that want to try to find a better situation for themselves or their family, they want to find a place where their kids might be actually going to school or receive medical care, or simply find a place where a rule of law exists. They have no alternative but resort to traffickers or smugglers. And the other aspect, of course, is that if smugglers and traffickers are selling a product, somebody is buying. And so trafficking in women is directly affected by the fact that there are users on the other side that are actually utilizing that phenomenon for whatever reason of exploitation of any sorts. And I think we have not been serious enough, especially in Europe, in attacking the consumer's part of this business and of this phenomenon. And that is what keeps it alive. That's what makes it one of the most lucrative business. And that is what is pushing a lot of people in the hands of the trafficker and subject to the most horrific level of violence and abuse. We have seen along the central Mediterranean routes so many cases of slavery, of forced bondage, of people being sold for whatever reason of exploitation along the roads coming towards North Africa. I think we are not serious enough in combating the whole aspect, and we are just worried about how many people might land irregularly in Europe, and that's what we think we should fight. We should go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, so does IOM think concretely? What can we do to protect these women?
I think the first thing that we need to seriously look at is to make it easier for migrants to reach Europe, first of all. Not just asylum seeker, migrant also looking for a job or for simply a better situation, number one. Number two, we have to recognize that you have a variety of vulnerability along the road. There are no instruments, legal instruments or visa instruments in Europe to allow these people to actually come to safety and have a logical and humane response to their vulnerability. And again, that's why they resort to smugglers and traffickers. So I think the whole issue of legal channel is paramount. I think we are lagging behind quite a lot in working on that aspect. And I think, of course, you have then a series of intervention at the source country that, however, are of a far longer term in terms of achieving result, in terms of development, in terms of improving rule of law, in terms of bringing about some cultural correction to the way women are treated or abused. But in the immediate and in the short term, I think Europe should go out and get out of its fortress approach.
Do you think a possible solution would be a common EU policy where there's the responsibilities equally divided to help on these issues?
I think if you are part of a union and you're serious about it, then you are called upon making sure that that union has a common approach to issues in general. I think it's bizarre that we have common law on the size of zucchinis and on how big clams can be in order to be put on the market, but we don't have a common law and approach on how to receive refugees, how to grant asylum, and how to assist and provide legal channel for migrants, vulnerable or not, to come to Europe. I think it's a major shortcoming that should call upon the conscience of all European voters, especially since elections are coming up.
And I'm going to leave you with that cliffhanger. Thank you so, so much for your inputs. Thank you for being here. And I wish you all a more productive and informative day ahead, the last day of the EDD. Thank you.
Thank you.